The suburbs of Seattle were usually quiet at night, with only the rustling of leaves in the wind or the faint hum of distant traffic breaking the silence. But tonight, the air carried a sense of unease. One that John Carter felt the moment he stepped out of his car. He shut the door behind him, breathing in the cool night air. But his eyes were immediately drawn to his house. The porch light illuminated the front door, which was ajar, slightly, but unmistakably open. John froze, his heart pounding. He was meticulous about locking up before leaving for work in the morning. Living alone with his golden retriever, Rex. He always double-checked the locks, especially since there had been reports of burglaries in the area recently. This wasn't right. He reached into his car's trunk and pulled out a small flashlight, gripping it tightly as he approached the house. The door creaked softly as he pushed it open. The warm glow of the living room light spilled into the hallway, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. The bookshelves were undisturbed. The couch sat as it always did, and the room appeared untouched. But as his eyes adjusted, John noticed something that made his stomach drop. On the living room wall, near the small wooden cabinet, were streaks of blood. They were dark and smeared, as if someone had dragged a bloodied hand across the surface. The sight froze John in his tracks. He swallowed hard, his pulse quickening as a wave of dread washed over him. "Rex?" John called out, his voice shaky. From the corner of the living room came a low growl. John turned his flashlight toward the sound, the beam landing on Rex. The usually friendly and playful golden retriever was crouched in the corner, his eyes fixed on the hallway leading to the bedrooms. His fur bristled along his back, and his lips were curled back in a quiet snarl. "Rex. What's wrong?" John whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his own heart. He crouched next to the dog, placing a hand on Rex's head. But Rex didn't move his gaze, his growl growing louder. Something was wrong. John aimed his flashlight down the hallway. The light swept across the walls, past framed family photos, and toward the slightly ajar door of his bedroom. The air was thick with tension, and a faint metallic smell lingered. Iron. Blood. "Is someone there?" John called out, his voice breaking the heavy silence. No response. Only the faint whistle of the wind through a window. Rex suddenly barked. A loud, sharp sound that echoed through the house. He lunged forward, his focus locked on the bedroom door. John hesitated, his hand gripping the flashlight so tightly his knuckles turned white. With a deep breath, he stepped toward the door. The door creaked open under his touch. The room inside was dark, the shadows deep and unmoving. John shone his flashlight around, sweeping over the bed, the wardrobe, and every corner of the room. Nothing seemed out of place, until the light hit the floor. Near the edge of the bed lay a pair of black shoes. And beside them, a small pool of blood glistened on the wooden floor. John's breath hitched as he stumbled back, his body hitting the doorframe. Rex barked again, louder this time, his stance protective and alert. John didn't dare step further into the room. Instead, he pulled Rex back and slammed the door shut. His hands shook as he fumbled for his phone, quickly dialing 911. "Seattle Police. What's your emergency?" "Someone's been in my house. There's blood on the walls. In my bedroom. I think something terrible happened," John managed to say, his voice trembling. The operator instructed him to stay put and wait for officers to arrive. John slid down to the floor, leaning against the wall, his mind racing. Rex stood beside him, his body tense, his eyes never leaving the bedroom door. Whatever had happened in this house, John knew it wasn't over yet. The atmosphere in John's house felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Every step he took was careful, deliberate, his mind racing with possibilities. Rex, his loyal golden retriever, stayed close, his alert eyes scanning every shadow as if anticipating something lurking in the dark. After investigating the blood in the bedroom and finding the ominous streaks on the walls, John noticed that the trail of blood extended further into the kitchen. The smears were uneven, some dark and thick, others faint and fading, as if whatever had left them had moved erratically. Each step toward the kitchen sent a fresh wave of unease through John. When he reached the kitchen, he saw that the trail ended at the back door. The door was shut, but something about it felt off. His eyes were immediately drawn to a small piece of fabric caught on the edge of the doorframe. John crouched down and carefully pulled the fabric free. It was a thick, coarse material, like that of a heavy coat or workwear. But what truly caught his attention was the embroidered symbol on it, a strange circular design with intersecting lines, resembling some sort of rune or sigil. The sight of it sent a chill down his spine, and he instinctively tightened his grip on the flashlight. "What the hell is this?" John murmured to himself, holding the fabric up to the light. The fabric felt cold and damp in his hands, and the symbol seemed almost deliberate, as if it carried some sort of message. His first instinct was to call the police immediately. But what if this was all just some misunderstanding? What if the blood, the torn fabric, and the open door were just unrelated coincidences? "Get a grip, John," he muttered. "Think before you act." He decided to dig deeper before involving the authorities. If he could piece together more information, he'd have a better understanding of what exactly he was dealing with. Rex suddenly barked, a sharp sound that made John jump. The dog bolted toward the basement door, his tail wagging but his posture still tense. "Rex? What is it?" John called out, hurrying after him. The basement was a place John rarely visited. It was mostly filled with old boxes, forgotten tools, and other remnants of the house's past. Following Rex down the creaky wooden steps, he felt the air grow colder, tinged with a faint musty odor. The beam of his flashlight swept across cobweb-covered shelves and dusty furniture. Rex stopped at the far corner of the basement. His nose pointed at an old wooden box. He barked again, then sat down, his eyes fixed on the box as if urging John to open it. John hesitated, then knelt down and pried the lid open. Inside were stacks of yellowed papers, bound together in brittle folders. As he sifted through them, his unease deepened. The documents detailed a decades-old land dispute involving the very property John now lived on. The previous owners, a family who had lived there generations before, had apparently been forced to sell under dubious circumstances. The papers included threatening letters, unclear legal agreements, and even handwritten notes filled with anger and resentment. A photograph slipped out from one of the folders. It showed a family of 4, a husband, wife, and 2 small children, standing in front of what was unmistakably John's house. But seeing the photo in this context made the home feel foreign, almost sinister. "What the hell is going on here?" John muttered, staring at the photo. One of the last documents he uncovered was a handwritten letter. The words were scrawled in uneven lines. filled with bitterness and warning. If you force us out of this land, no one will live here in peace. This land belongs to us. And I will do whatever it takes to reclaim justice. John's hand trembled as he folded the letter back into the folder. He sat on the cold floor, his mind reeling. Could the strange occurrences in the house be tied to this history? Was someone trying to make good on this chilling threat? Rex nudged John's arm with his nose, breaking his train of thought. The dog's calm presence was grounding. A reminder that John wasn't entirely alone in this. Good boy, Rex, John whispered, stroking the dog's head. We'll figure this out together. Clutching the fabric and the documents, John climbed back upstairs. It was time to stop second-guessing himself. Too many pieces were falling into place for this to be mere coincidence. Grabbing his phone, he dialed the police. As the line rang, he took one last look around his quiet, dimly lit home, knowing that whatever lay ahead, it was far from over. The tension in John's house had become almost suffocating. After uncovering the documents about the land dispute, John turned to his old friend Mia, a seasoned investigative journalist known for her unflinching resolve. Mia had always been relentless when it came to exposing the truth, no matter the risks. As John laid out the papers, photos, and ominous letters he'd found in the basement, Mia's brows furrowed deeply. This is bigger than you think, John, she said, flipping through the yellowed pages. Land disputes like this usually involve powerful people. If what these documents suggest is true, then whoever forced the previous owners to sell this property is hiding a very dark secret. John nodded, his anxiety evident. But why now? Why is all this suddenly surfacing? And why is my house at the center of it? Mia didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled out her laptop and began researching the land's history and the families who had lived there. Hours passed as she dug through news archives, legal records, and other sources. Slowly, a sinister pattern began to emerge. The land John's house was built on had been the subject of a long-standing dispute between its previous owners and a real estate conglomerate called Hale Developments. The company's CEO, Victor Hale, was a notorious figure in the region, known for his aggressive tactics. Hale had built an empire by acquiring land through bribery, intimidation, and, in some cases, outright violence. Families who refused to sell often found themselves targeted by a series of accidents or, worse, disappearances. Victor Hale isn't just a ruthless businessman, Mia said, her eyes glued to the screen. There are whispers about him running a vast criminal network, money laundering, smuggling, even murder. If he or his people are involved in what's happening here, we're dealing with someone incredibly dangerous. John sat back, his face pale. Before he could respond, Rex began growling softly. The dog stood up, his ears perked, his gaze fixed on the back window overlooking the woods. Rex? What is it? John asked. But Rex didn't break his focus. Mia grabbed a flashlight. We should check it out. If Rex senses something, we can't ignore it. The three ventured into the backyard, with Rex leading the way. The forest behind John's house, usually tranquil, now felt oppressive. Every rustle of leaves seemed amplified, every shadow more sinister. Rex stopped at a clearing near an old oak tree, barking sharply. Mia shone the flashlight, and its beam landed on a metallic glint in the dirt. As they moved closer, they saw it clearly, a blood-stained knife half buried in the soil. This isn't a coincidence, Mia said, her voice tense. Someone was here. Recently. Around the area. They found more evidence, footprints in the soft ground. A half-smoked cigarette. And a torn piece of cloth snagged on a branch. It was clear that someone had been watching the house. Possibly even preparing for something. Back inside. They pieced together everything they'd learned. Mia continued researching. Uncovering even more about Victor Hale. His influence stretched far beyond real estate. He was implicated in a web of criminal activities. Including the mysterious disappearances of people who had opposed him. This is bad. John. Mia said gravely. If Hale finds out we've uncovered this, we could be in serious danger. Rex lay at John's feet. His body tense and alert. The loyal dog seemed to sense the growing threat. Never taking his eyes off the front door. John clenched his fists. His fear giving way to determination. We can't let this stay buried. If Hale is behind all of this, he needs to be exposed. Mia nodded but didn't look convinced. We'll need more evidence. And we need to be careful. We're not just dealing with one man, we're up against an entire criminal network. As the quiet Seattle night gave way to a storm of uncertainty, John knew his life had changed forever. His once safe home was now the epicenter of a dark conspiracy. But with Mia's expertise and Rex's unwavering loyalty, he resolved to face whatever lay ahead. No matter how dangerous. The tension in John's small kitchen was palpable as Mia laid out her daring plan. After hours of analyzing the documents and evidence they had gathered, Mia concluded that the only way to force Victor Hale into the open was to bait him into a trap. Hale wasn't the type to ignore a threat. Especially if it involved incriminating evidence. If they made him believe that the evidence could expose him, he would have no choice but to act. We can't just sit here waiting for him to make a move, Mia said. Her voice firm. If we don't force his hand, he'll keep sending people to watch us, or worse. We have to make him believe he's at risk of losing everything. John nodded hesitantly. His anxiety evident in his furrowed brow. Rex sat by his feet. His sharp eyes scanning the room as if he could sense the danger in the air. Mia suggested a location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was isolated enough to avoid drawing attention but still accessible for a controlled confrontation. She drafted a fake email from an anonymous address, claiming to have damning evidence against Hale and proposing a meeting at the warehouse. She knew Hale wouldn't come himself, but he would send his men. The following night, John, Mia, and Rex drove to the warehouse. The wind howled through the desolate area, carrying a biting chill that matched the tension in the air. The warehouse was a hulking structure, its rusted walls and broken windows standing as a testament to years of neglect. We need to stay sharp, Mia said, double-checking the recording equipment hidden in her jacket and the phone she would use to document the meeting. This isn't a negotiation. If anything feels off, we leave immediately. John nodded, gripping a flashlight tightly. Rex trotted beside him, his ears perked and his fur bristling slightly, as if ready to pounce at any sign of danger. They entered the warehouse, their footsteps echoing across the vast, empty space. The air inside was damp and heavy, thick with the smell of rust and decay. Mia's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating old crates and machinery long abandoned. After a tense few minutes, the sound of approaching footsteps shattered the silence. A group of 4 men entered, all dressed in black with cold, calculating expressions. One of them, clearly the leader, stepped forward. Who are you? And what do you want? he demanded, his voice dripping with menace. Mia stepped forward, her voice steady. We have evidence that ties Victor Hale to illegal activities. If you don't want this going public, we need to talk. The man smirked, his eyes narrowing. You think you're clever, don't you? Hale doesn't negotiate with threats. Without warning, one of the men behind him pulled a gun and aimed it directly at Mia and John. The tension snapped like a taut wire. And Rex began growling loudly, his body tense and ready to strike. As one of the men stepped closer, Rex sprang into action. The dog lunged at the man's arm, sinking his teeth into the hand holding the gun. The man screamed, dropping the weapon as Rex held on with unrelenting force. Run! Mia shouted, grabbing John's arm and pulling him toward the back exit. John called for Rex, and the dog released his grip, dashing after them as they sprinted through the darkened corridors of the warehouse. Before leaving, Mia's eyes caught something, a metal cabinet pushed against the wall. She yanked it open and found stacks of documents inside. Without hesitation, she stuffed them into her bag and followed John and Rex out the door. As they ran to the car, gunshots rang out behind them, the bullets missing by inches. They dove into the car, and John floored the gas pedal, tearing away from the warehouse as fast as he could. Breathing heavily, Mia unzipped her bag and began sifting through the papers. One document after another revealed damning evidence, financial records detailing offshore accounts, emails ordering the removal of dissenters, and even contracts signed by Hale himself implicating him in illegal land acquisitions. This is it, Mia said, her voice filled with triumph. This is everything we need to bring him down. John glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his face still tense but with a glimmer of hope. What do we do now? We take this to the press and the police, Mia replied. Hale's empire ends here. In the back seat, Rex panted heavily, his eyes alert and watchful, as if ready for whatever came next. As the warehouse disappeared into the night, John felt a wave of relief wash over him. Though the fight wasn't over, they finally had the upper hand. With Mia's determination, Rex's unwavering loyalty, and the incriminating evidence in their hands, they were one step closer to dismantling the web of corruption and bringing Hale to justice. Weeks after the tense showdown at the abandoned warehouse, the story of John, Mia, and Rex became the focus of local and national attention. With the incriminating documents retrieved from the warehouse, Mia wasted no time contacting law enforcement and trusted journalists. The undeniable evidence, including offshore bank accounts, shady contracts, and letters directly implicating Victor Hale, caused an uproar. Hale and his closest associates were arrested in a swift operation. The charges against them ranged from corruption and money laundering to abuse of power and ties to several unsolved disappearances. The case quickly moved to trial, drawing significant media attention. Mia published a groundbreaking exposé, revealing the extent of Hale's criminal empire and the years of harm he had inflicted on countless families. Her article was more than just an investigative report, it was a call to action. She urged the public and the government to not only punish those responsible but also provide reparations for the families who had been victimized. Justice, as she put it, was about more than arrests, it was about righting the wrongs left behind. Hale's downfall became a symbol of accountability, as he was led out of the courthouse in handcuffs, his once commanding presence reduced to a shadow of shame. It was clear that his reign of terror had finally ended. For John and Rex, returning home was both a relief and a challenge. The house, once a safe haven, now held memories of fear and danger. Yet, it also symbolized resilience. Rex, the brave and loyal golden retriever, quickly became a local hero. Stories of his protective instincts, his courage in the face of danger, and his role in uncovering key evidence spread throughout the community. Neighbors would stop by to greet Rex, bringing him treats and toys as tokens of gratitude. Despite the attention, Rex remained the same, a loyal companion, happiest by John's side. For John, the experience was transformative. Sitting in his living room one quiet evening, he reflected on everything that had happened. The ordeal had been terrifying, but it had also taught him the value of courage and the importance of standing up for what was right. Justice isn't easy, he told Mia over coffee one afternoon. But it's worth fighting for. If people like us don't take a stand, people like Hale will keep getting away with it. Mia nodded in agreement. You've proven that even ordinary people can make a difference. You didn't back down. And because of that, lives will be changed. Determined to live with purpose, John began getting involved in his community. He joined local initiatives aimed at protecting vulnerable families from exploitation and worked with organizations advocating for fairness in housing and land ownership. The house that once held dark secrets became a hub of positivity. John opened his doors to neighbors, fostering a sense of connection and trust. And through it all, Rex remained at his side, a constant reminder of the loyalty and courage that had helped them survive. Every time John looked into Rex's bright eyes, he felt an overwhelming gratitude. Rex had saved him, physically and emotionally. One sunny morning, as warm light spilled through the windows and filled the house with a golden glow, John sat on the front steps with a cup of coffee. Rex lay beside him, ears perked as birds chirped in the distance. We did it, Rex, John said, reaching down to scratch the dog's head. We fought. We won. And now we can finally live in peace. Looking out at the horizon, John felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in months. The road to justice had been perilous, but it was worth every step. The memories of those dangerous days would always remain. But they were now lessons, reminders that truth and justice were always worth pursuing, no matter the odds. Breathing in the fresh morning air, John smiled. Life wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about building, protecting, and making a difference, for himself, his community, and for those who would carry on the story.